Hey everyone, I'm Kelvin, and this is Kelvin's Faith Unfiltered. To all the Dan McClellan supporters who spent so much time and energy trying to discredit me lately, this video is for you. Well, really it's directed at you. It's really for Christians who are being confronted with the same criticisms. I hope this encourages you. Let me be clear right up front. The intent of this video is not to criticize Dan McClellan himself. I actually plan to do that later, but hope to do it carefully, humbly, and with the respect his work deserves. But today isn't about Dan. It's about some of his followers. Not all, but those who made it their mission to dismiss me before I even got started. So for those of you who think you've got me all figured out, here are a few things you might want to stick around for. Let's start with criticism number one, and that criticism being, you're not educated enough to critique Dan.
Dan has a degree, which means he can say stuff like that, and there's not a thing you can do about it.
To that I'd say there are plenty of obvious things that don't require a PhD to notice. Common sense, honesty, and consistency, those are things that don't require a degree. And some of the most basic contradictions are right there in the open for everyone to see. The second criticism I hear is that I'm biased because I was raised in a Christian home, educated in and around the church, and I still believe in God. But here's what's funny. Dan McClellan isn't an atheist.
We'll see that I am not and never have been an atheist.
Not only is he not an atheist, he's a member in good standing in the LDS Church.
A question that inevitably comes up after my Mormonism is brought up is whether or not I apply the same academic.
Yes, that is correct, the Mormon Church. He doesn't just have blank, undefined kind of faith in God, but an organized one, rooted in the teachings of one Joseph Smith. Now, this video is not about criticizing the LDS Church. It is to say, for all of you who thought Dan was as intellectually pure as the driven snow, well, you're wrong. Not only is he a member, but he also worked for them as a translator. Again, Dan, I have no issue with that. But I would think those who told me that I was biased and that I chose dogma over data because I believed in God, well, I guess I wish they would give you the same standard. I guess if we held their standard, we'd both be disqualified. I was told things like, I too have an invisible friend. Well, me and Dan do too, I guess. Now, some of you might say, well, that's not a big deal. You can believe in God and still be an academic. You can be a member of a church and still be a scholar. And yes, Dan says he presents the academic consensus often, but states that he doesn't always agree with them and tries to tell us when that occurs. But normally that is like little stuff. Let's talk about the big stuff. The stuff he has to profess to be a member of the LDS Church. Now, if I am wrong about any of these, please let me know. I'm not a Mormon scholar, but here's what I understand. To be a baptized and active member in good standing with the LDS Church, one must profess faith in Jesus Christ. That includes his bodily resurrection and literal divinity. Well, that's already a supernatural claim that secular academia overwhelmingly rejects. If you profess this, Dan, then can you explain that data that will lead you to that belief? I really don't think most of the people that went after me are going to accept your data on that topic. Next, you have to affirm that Joseph Smith was a true prophet of God, chosen to restore the true church that had supposedly fallen into apostasy. I'll wait for the data. Next, accept the Book of Mormon as scripture equal to the Bible, believed to have been translated from golden plates delivered by an angel. Now, believing the Book of Mormon as scripture isn't that big of a deal. I mean, you don't really have what most people would consider a high view of scripture. But the thing with the golden plates, that seems like a leap. Next, sustain the current president of the LDS Church as a living prophet who receives ongoing revelation from God. Participate in temple ordinances like baptism for the dead and eternal marriage, which are tied to the belief that humans can ultimately become exalted, godlike beings. With all due respect, I'm not trying to insult the man's religion, but it seems about as full of presuppositions as mine. Presuppositions I thought academia was supposed to train out of him. Again, not Dan, just his defenders, the ones specifically that came after me. I mean, these aren't small claims, guys. They're miraculous, theological, supernatural. All the things the so-called academic world says you have to leave at the door if you want to be objective. What about the social progressives that love Dan so much? Have you seen the LDS's view of homosexuality? Yikes. If Dan rejects those things, then why would he remain in the organization? Maybe he has his reasons. Maybe it's financial. Again, this isn't about bashing Dan. It just doesn't seem consistent to me. And it especially doesn't seem consistent with how I've been judged. I just want to point out the types of things Dan has to profess in his personal life as a Mormon, and then the things he has to say in his academic life. If you think they never meet, you've never met a Mormon. All the skeptics, atheists, and agnostics are still wanting to back this guy, even with all those claims that he has to profess. Those same people have no right to call me unqualified to think critically, while defending someone who by faith commitment believes Joseph Smith translated golden plates by divine means. So what's the point? The point is, all of you elevated the critical thinking of Dan because of his scholarship. But look at what he has to profess in his personal life. Don't you think he's suspect in your worldview if he has to profess all those things? Maybe he'll come out and say he doesn't believe any of that. But doesn't that make him suspect? Doesn't that seem like a conflict of interest? I mean, Dan's audience right now is a mix of deconstructing Christians, skeptics, atheists, and agnostics who've long wanted to see the Bible dismantled. It's a perfect formula for going viral. But if you dig a little deeper into Dan, he seems much more complicated than what you thought. Now back to me. I want you all to know I am doing my best to bring in other scholars to talk about these topics. I'm not trying to handle this all on an island by myself. So to all of you watching, if you actually care about truth over trend, reason over rhetoric, faith that stands up to scrutiny, and consistency over controversy, subscribe and stick around. It's going to get fun.